My name is Martha. I'm 71 years old. And last winter I slept in an old car for 3 months, parked beside the cemetery where my husband now rests. I still remember that first night. Curled up in my worn sweater, clutching the handbag that held all I had left. My ID, a debit card, and a few family photos. The cold was biting. But inside me, it was 100 times colder. Just 3 months before, I was still a loved mother. Or at least, I believed I was. After my husband, Raymond, passed away, I thought I'd stay in the home we had shared for over 40 years. But my daughter Angela and her husband Miles began whispering things that sounded reasonable, but rang hollow. "Mom, you need to rest. We're really worried about you. The house is too big for you alone. Have you thought about somewhere quieter? I heard there's a really nice senior living center just outside the city." I sat there on the sofa I had custom made myself, looking around the living room now filled with Miles's fake laughter and Angela's carefully measured concern. The hints grew clearer by the day. I was no longer welcome in my own home. I never signed anything to sell the house. But they cleverly got control by asking me to temporarily transfer the deed for easier management. I believed them. I believed no child would ever hurt their mother. 2 weeks later, I was asked to move out for a short while so they could fix the kitchen floor and a leaky ceiling. I left with 2 bags, thinking I'd be back in a few days. I never returned. Angela texted coldly, "Mom, the repairs will take longer than expected. We think it's best if you start looking for a more stable place to live." I called, no answer. Emailed, no reply. I showed up at the house, now their house, and was turned away. I remember sitting in the car all night that day, not daring to cry out loud, afraid someone would think I'd lost my mind. I used to be a nurse. I helped deliver countless babies. I cared for Angela through every fever, every splinter. I skipped meals to buy her prom dress, and now I was excess and inconvenience. The days that followed, I survived on canned food bought with my tiny pension and a bit of cash I had hidden in the lining of my coat. I washed at gas stations, rinsed my face with cheap bottled water. I parked in an empty lot next to the cemetery. It was quiet there. Raymond was nearby. One night, during a storm, the wind cracked the windshield and rain poured inside. I shivered under a thin blanket, staring at the ceiling of the car thinking, I might die here. And maybe no one would know. Sometimes Angela called. Not to check in, just to make sure I was doing okay in that polite, veiled way that meant, don't cause trouble. I lied. I told her I was staying with an old friend, that I was taking yoga classes, that I was doing just fine. The truth was, I was afraid to burden anyone, afraid of being seen as weak. Afraid that if I asked for help, I'd hear my own daughter say the words out loud, "You've become too much for us." Then one morning, as I sat quietly in the driver's seat, eyes swollen from another sleepless night, a woman knocked on the car window. She wore a red coat, had silver hair, and eyes that were surprised and kind. "Martha, right? I'm Patricia, an old friend of Raymond's. Tilly told me she said you were out here." I nodded. My throat closed up. I couldn't speak. She opened the car door without hesitation and simply said, "Come to my house. There's a fireplace, hot tea, and a real bed." Patricia's kitchen smelled of cinnamon, honey, and just a hint of thyme. That warm, settled scent only found in homes that have weathered both storms and spring. I sat there, clutching the warm teacup she had just poured for me, eyes fixed on the pale pink curtains fluttering in the morning light. How long had it been since I last sat at someone's kitchen table? Not hunched in the back of a car, not sipping lukewarm water from a thermos cap. Patricia didn't speak much, but the way she added another slice of toast to my plate or topped off my tea when it was only half empty, it made my chest ache with something dangerously close to tears. "Raymond used to talk about you," she said, smoothing the tablecloth with one hand. "We went to high school together. I hadn't seen him in years, not until the funeral." I lowered my gaze. Raymond's death? Wasn't that the start of everything unraveling? "Mrs. Tilly saw you at the laundromat last week." She continued. "She was worried, so I decided to go looking." I didn't say anything. I wasn't used to kindness that didn't come with a price. A few days later, I moved into Patricia's attic room. It was small, with a low ceiling, a wooden bed, and a window that looked out over her backyard. When I closed the door behind me, I stood motionless for a long time, as if afraid it might all vanish. I ran my hand over the fresh white sheets, over the lotus-shaped lamp. Could I really begin again, in a place like this? One afternoon, while helping her dust a bookshelf, I came across an old folder with my name on it. Property transfer documents, the ones I believed were just temporary. My signature was there, shaky and uneven. But tucked beside it was another sheet I didn't recognize. It was an asset report. And it said, "Former owner is no longer mentally competent to manage property." The signature at the bottom, Angela Taylor, my daughter. I nearly dropped the papers. Mentally incompetent? Me? The woman who worked at a hospital for 28 years without ever misreading a prescription? The woman who cared for Raymond by hand until his very last breath? I walked into the living room, fists clenched around the papers, lips trembling. Where did you get this? Patricia looked up from her magazine. I know a lawyer. Her name's Janice. She helped me with some property stuff a while ago. I asked her to look into your case, and this is what we found. I sank into the chair. You're telling me my daughter lied to take ownership of my house? That's not all, Patricia said slowly. She filed for temporary guardianship, based on claims that you were disoriented after Raymond's death. I couldn't breathe. Disoriented? Yes, I had lost almost everything, but that didn't mean I couldn't think clearly. Didn't mean I didn't know where my home was, who my family was, or what was a lie. And then they did everything they could to make sure you weren't there anymore, Patricia added gently, like she feared I might shatter. Something cold crawled from the base of my skull down my spine. This wasn't just pain anymore. It was fury. Angela hadn't simply abandoned me. She had planned it. She had tried to paint me as a confused, senile old woman in the eyes of the law, just to claim my house. And I, in my trust, had handed her the rope. I used to think that if I just stayed quiet, didn't cause trouble, my daughter would eventually come around. But I was wrong. And I also understood now. If I didn't fight to reclaim my dignity, I would die in that same terrifying silence. That night, I sat in my room and opened my old notebook. On the first page, I wrote 3 lines. Meet with lawyer Janice. Request full guardianship records. Rewrite my will. If Angela thought I was just a docile, senile old woman she could push around, then she had forgotten who taught her to say no to injustice in the first place. I used to give everything away. But this time, I would take it all back. I was watering the plants in the backyard when the doorbell rang. Late afternoon sunlight streamed through the climbing rose trellis, glinting against my calloused hands. I thought it might be Sharon or Patricia. Both of them often stop by around this time. But when I opened the gate, my heart skipped a strange beat. Angela. And Miles. Standing there with 2 bulky suitcases beside them, as if they were heading off on an extended summer vacation, not visiting the aging mother they had tucked away into a forgotten corner of their lives. Hi, Mom, Angela said brightly, her smile so wide it seemed artificial. You're looking much better. Miles gave a half wave, the other hand rolling his suitcase over the stone path. Nice house, Mom. Can we come in? I avoided their gaze, but stepped aside to let them in. My small country home, usually so peaceful, suddenly felt like a stage I never auditioned to be on. Angela looked around with the eyes of a realtor, not a daughter reunited with her mother. She pointed at the curtains. These are a bit dark, don't you think? Cream ones would brighten the place. Miles clucked his tongue at the kitchen. No espresso machine? It's a little basic here, but you could sell and move back to the city with us. I sank into my old armchair, gripping the worn arms so my hands wouldn't tremble. They didn't ask how I had been living, whether I was warm enough during those first months, sleeping in my car. Instead, their questions were sharp and familiar. Do you still have the old will? Are you planning to update the savings account? Whose name is on the title deed? I didn't answer. I just gave a thin smile and poured them tea. They stayed for 3 days. 3 days that stretched like 3 years. Angela cooked dinner once, a lasagna that burned at the bottom, though she praised it endlessly. Miles brought his laptop and spent the afternoons typing away in the living room, and I couldn't help but wonder if he was looking up property laws or inheritance procedures. On the second evening, they invited a local pastor to dinner, claiming they wanted to reconnect with family and faith. But I knew that pastor. He'd once notarized a house transfer for a mutual acquaintance of theirs. a coincidence too convenient to ignore. Patricia dropped by while they were lighting scented candles and arranging the table like it was a dinner party from a lifestyle magazine. She looked at me with quiet sympathy when Angela cheerfully pulled out a chair for her. Patricia declined. "Oh, I won't intrude. Just bringing some sesame toast, Martha's favorite." She handed me the bag and gently squeezed my hand, a silent message. "You're not alone, Martha." After dinner, Angela and Miles retreated to the living room. As the door closed, I heard their hushed voices. "She's getting more forgetful, easier to persuade. Do you think she'll change the will? If not, we could take her in for a while, pretend we're helping out, and nudge her into selling the place." I stood behind the thin wooden door, back pressed to the wall. Cold. Not from the weather, but from the way my daughter, the same girl I once cradled in my arms, panicked over scraped knees, now plotted with her husband how to profit off her aging mother. The next morning, I made breakfast, toast with homemade strawberry jam and soft-boiled eggs. Miles gave a token compliment, while Angela rifled through her purse, pulling out a thick stack of papers. "Mom," she began, voice smooth as velvet but eyes hard as stone, "we had a lawyer draft an updated will. Just a few small tweaks, nothing major. Just sign it, okay? It'll save us from legal trouble later." I looked at the pages. Nothing about them was small. They wanted this house, my savings, even the little plot in the back where I grow lavender. There wasn't a single mention of Sharon or Patricia, the only people who truly stood by me. Not one word of gratitude. Not even a trace of love. I picked up the pen. Angela exhaled in relief. Miles got up to refill my tea as if the deal had been sealed. But I didn't sign. I set the pen down, my voice calm but firm. "No, you didn't come here out of love. You came for money." Angela's face drained of color. Miles opened his mouth to speak, but I held up a hand. "I slept in a car for 3 months by the beach. Did either of you check on me? Did you call? Look for me? And now you show up, pretending affection, shoving papers in my face like I'm some piece of property to be claimed." I stood. For the first time in years, I felt taller than them both. "Leave, before I run out of patience and forget my manners." Miles muttered something under his breath. Angela tried one last smile. "Mom, you're just being emotional. We're trying to do what's best for you." "Then leave me in peace," I said. They left that afternoon. No goodbyes. No closing words. And as the door shut behind them, it felt like I could finally breathe again. In the silence that followed, I poured myself another cup of tea and stepped out onto the porch. The lavender swayed in the breeze, vibrant and full. For the first time in years, I knew I still had control over my own life. I sat frozen in the living room, hands resting on my lap, my thumb lightly brushing my index finger as if trying to rub off some invisible stain. Patricia's house usually glowed in warm amber light during the late afternoons, but today, all I saw was my shadow stretching long across the wooden floor. And in that shadow, I saw a mother, once deceived, discarded, disrespected, but not anymore. Angela and Miles had just left after dinner. They took 2 containers of leftover pie and a fake smile tucked inside a cloth napkin. Just before stepping out, Miles had said in that foamy, soft voice of his, "Mom, if you need help with any of the estate paperwork, we're happy to pitch in. You know, just to make it less stressful." I silently thanked Tilly for grabbing my hand under the table just in time. They thought I was old now, confused, soft. No. Their little performance all week had made me nauseous. Those sudden prayer circles held in the living room. Those overly long hugs Angela gave me like we were close. They called me Mom in syrupy tones, but their eyes lingered more on the file cabinet than my face. I was no longer the mother they loved. I was just a walking wallet, with a house, a savings account, and an untouched will. And now they wanted me to change it. That evening, after they left, I reopened the mailbox. There was a cream-colored envelope slipped under the door. It was from Sharon, the gentle neighbor from across the street who often gifted me jars of plum jam. She had only written a few lines. "Mrs. Martha, if you need someone to go with you to the lawyer's office, I'm happy to come. Don't let them guide you down a path you didn't choose. I've always believed your voice matters." I burst into tears. Not because I was hurt, but because I realized someone truly saw me. The next morning, I called Angela. "Can you come over? There's something I want to make clear." 10 minutes later, Angela and Miles showed up, eyes sparkling with hope. I sat across from them, my teacup still steaming. "First of all," I began, my voice strangely calm, "I want to say that I know neither of you are here because you're worried about me. I know the pastor visits and those lavish dinners were just part of a script." Angela's face paled. Miles glanced at his wife. "You've got it wrong," Angela said. "We were just trying to make up for all the time you had to spend out there." "I wasn't out there," I cut her off. "I was put out by my own daughter. There's a difference, Angela." I let the silence stretch, then slowly placed a sheet of paper on the table. It was a certified copy of my new will, signed by the lawyer. "I've changed the will," I said. "This house no longer belongs to you, and what I leave behind will go into a fund to help older women rebuild their lives. Women like me, betrayed by the people they once trusted most." Angela shot to her feet. "You're doing this to punish us? You thought this was some kind of game?" I looked her straight in the eyes. "No, this isn't revenge. I'm simply choosing to give my love, my trust, and my resources to the right people." Miles swallowed hard but said nothing. Maybe, for the first time in his life, he realized I was no longer the silent mother he could ignore. "So we mean nothing to you now?" Angela's voice cracked. I answered gently, "When you only saw me as a walking bank account, you made the choice to step out of my heart." After they left, this time without any pie, I exhaled deeply. I wasn't trembling. I wasn't regretful. I placed the new will back into the old wooden box, right next to the little notebook where I'd written down names of women I'd met. At gas stations, in church pews, in hospital waiting rooms. Women I planned to help. I was no longer the woman pushed out of her home. I was the woman who chose to return to it and reclaim herself. I didn't need anyone's permission to do what was right. I've lost count of how many times I've sat by a window like this, the late daylight slanting through the blinds, casting a thin gold line across the wooden floor, while I cradled a lukewarm cup of tea like a worn ritual. But today, I'm not sitting here to wait for someone to arrive, nor to grieve someone who left. Today, I sit to look out into a world that, for the first time, doesn't frame me as mother, grandmother, burden, or someone who should know her place. Today was the day I called my attorney to officially transfer the house into the ownership of a new trust. A trust named Second Morning, because all of us deserve another dawn after being left in the midnight of our loved ones' betrayals. I didn't tell Angela. Not out of fear, but because simply didn't need to. As long as I still worried whether my daughter would be upset, I was still allowing her to tug on the reins, dragging me back into the old stable of silence. That afternoon, I went with Patricia to the community center on Waterfield Street, a place where older folks gather to share their stories or play dominoes. I didn't feel like I belonged there, but I wanted to listen. A woman named Hattie, nearly 80, told us her son once threatened to put her in a nursing home if she didn't hand over her savings account. "He said it was to plan for my future," she said with a dry laugh. But really, it was so he could trade in for a newer car for his wife. I squeezed her hand when she finished speaking. I knew that feeling, when the child you carried inside you looks at you like a tired old ATM. I wrote Hattie's name in the little notebook I keep in my bag, the first name on a new list. That night, I dreamed again of my old room. Not this house, but the bedroom in the very first place Earl and I rented after we got married. In the dream, Earl was sitting by the window reading the paper, and I was arranging flowers. But they weren't for display. They were for mourning. And I was arranging them quietly, steadily, like I knew it was the last thing I could control in a world already starting to crack apart. I woke at 4 a.m. Didn't cry, but something inside me had quietly dissolved. The belief that I could still hold together a family that had been rotting for years. The next morning, Angela called again. "I know you're mad, but we're family, Mom," she said, her voice sugary sweet like canned peaches. "Don't go overboard with the paperwork stuff," I replied calmly. "It's not that I'm going overboard. It's just the first time I'm being clear." I heard Miles in the background, probably trying to whisper something. Then Angela asked, "So, are you planning to invite us over to your house again?" I looked around, at the house once filled with their voices, the thud of shoes tossed aside, The sighs when I cooked something no one liked. No, I said. This house now belongs to people who never saw me as an obligation. And I hung up. I started changing the small things. I sold the old couch Angela once said gave her a headache just by sitting on it. I bought a floral upholstered armchair from Ruth, my neighbor. The colors had faded, but it felt warm when I sat in it. I took down all the family photos from the walls and packed them into a box. I hung up drawings made by children I'd met at church instead. I replaced the curtains. The rug, too. But the biggest thing I changed was how I saw myself. I stopped asking, "Will they call?" every time the phone rang. I stopped opening my wallet every time I saw a message with the word urgent. I stopped feeling guilty for saying no. I began learning how to live for myself. A week later, I hosted a small dinner in my backyard. Just 4 women were invited: Patricia, Sharon, Hattie, and Maribel. A widowed mother I met in a secondhand bookstore. None of them were related to me by blood, but not one of them had ever sold me out for convenience. We ate ham pie I made, drank chamomile tea, and told our life stories. No one complained. We laughed. And for the first time in many months, I felt like I truly belonged. Not because someone allowed me in, but because I had chosen the right place to be. That night, I wrote in my journal, "I no longer need to apologize for surviving. I no longer need anyone's permission to go on living. If this is a severing, then it's a necessary one. Because rebirth never comes from the hands of those who keep you drowning." I signed my name, Martha Eleanor Wexler, the one who came back and isn't leaving again. There are mornings when you wake not because an alarm went off, not because someone needs you, not because of duty. You wake because the sun touched your eyes and your heart is finally quiet. I just had one of those mornings. No text from Angela, no missed calls from Miles, no half-hearted apologies showing up like a lingering shadow. Nothing at all. Just the tap of a sparrow against the window pane and the scent of toast drifting in from the kitchen where I had promised myself a simple breakfast. And I thought, this is freedom. Not loud, not announced. Just a stillness inside you that at last has found a home. 3 days ago, I received a letter from the attorney's office. The asset transfer process was complete. As of that day, this house no longer bore the name Martha Wexler, a mother, on its title deed, but stood under the legal protection of a small private trust dedicated to elderly women cast out by their families. No one, not even my daughter, can touch it now without going through layers of safeguards I personally put in place. I didn't do this to punish. I did it to survive, so that no woman has to find herself listed as transferable property after an uncomfortable dinner conversation. It took me almost a lifetime to understand. Some children aren't exactly cruel. They're just selfish enough to believe they're entitled to dictate the entire course of their mother's life. No, not anymore. Yesterday afternoon, Angela and Miles showed up again. No call. No message. I was tending the garden when I saw them approaching. Angela wore a cream-colored coat, holding a paper bag. Cookies, maybe, or something like it. Her face no longer looked angry, but it wasn't exactly remorseful either. She came as though settling one final obligation. "How are you, Mom?" she asked, eyes lingering on the row of lavender I'd just pruned. "Very well," I replied, not looking up. "You got the notice, right? About the house?" "I did." Miles and I thought it was a bit abrupt. I set the shears down, wiped my hands on the hem of an old shirt, and looked her square in the eye. "What was abrupt, Angela? That I finally did something after months of being treated like I was invisible, or that I no longer let you and Miles make decisions about my life for me?" Miles stood silent. Angela pressed her lips together. "Don't you think we should talk again?" I gave a short laugh. "No, because I no longer live in the cage of obligatory gratitude. I know exactly who left me at the airport like a piece of luggage. I also know who stayed silent, and who did so because it was more convenient." "So that's it?" she asked softly. "You're just going to grow old alone?" "Not alone," I said. "Just not with people who made me feel the most lonely." I didn't invite them in, and they didn't insist. They left. I didn't watch them go. That night I sat alone in the kitchen, beneath the soft warmth of a lamp, with a plate of apple pie Patricia had brought over that morning. On the table was the first draft of the second season project, a series of community gatherings for older women focused on basic legal literacy and asset rights. I don't know how many will come, but I do know this. If even one woman doesn't let her children walk her into a nursing home like they're taking an old dog in for the final shot, then every bit of this will be worth it. I placed my hand over my heart. The rhythm was steady. No bitterness. No fear. Just a quiet sense that, at last, I had stood on the right side of myself. I wrote a few lines in my small notebook, on the last page. I used to think silence meant acceptance, but no. Silence can be resistance, too, when used at the right moment. I didn't scream when they abandoned me. I didn't smash things. I didn't beg. I just stood up, little by little. And that, more than anything, is what made me no longer weak. I don't need to be the kind of mother they demand. I just need to be a person, whole and enough. I looked up at the moonlight spilling through the window. Freedom doesn't need applause or fireworks. Just a heart that knows it still has worth, even if no one ever says so. I am Martha Eleanor Wexler. I was silent, not anymore.